Hello and welcome to another episode of the Ohio Huntsman Podcast with your hosts Jason, Jacob, and Jeff. And this podcast is sponsored by Monster Whitetail Grub. Monster Whitetail Grub is a great deer feed company. They've got everything you need for deer feed. They've got deer feed, which is like a high protein feed. It's got mineral mixed in. It's a really good product. They've also got straight mineral. They've got flavored corns, tons of different flavors like apple, cherry, persimmon, peanut butter, a huge list of flavors. So they're a long-range attractant because of those flavors, and best of all, they're an Ohio company. So by supporting them, you're supporting the Ohio economy. They are not only located in Ohio, but they do their best to source all of their ingredients from Ohio, even down to the buckets that they sell their product in. So they're a great company, and we appreciate them sponsoring the show. This episode is an important one because it affects all the hunters in Ohio, not just deer hunters, not just turkey hunters, not just waterfowl hunters, everybody, not even just hunters, but backpackers, hikers, because we talk about the AEP land with the guys from the Ohio Chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. So we talk about what's going on with AEP. We talk about the proposed license and tag price increases and what that's going to do for Ohio's conservation and wildlife budget, and a lot of other important things that anybody interested in the outdoors really needs to be aware of. So this is a really good one. Really excited about this episode. Hope you enjoy it, and hopefully you learn something. One little disclaimer before we start this one. We did have some intermittent connection issues, so there are some spots where the audio gets a little sketchy. You have to bear with us. I was able to repair most of it, but there are still a few spots where you'll notice the audio gets a little choppy. So sorry about that, but we wanted to make sure you guys got the information. The information is still good, and the information is still conveyed, but we wanted to put that disclaimer on there so you guys know that there is a little bit of choppiness in some of the audio. So with that, let's start the episode with John Ingram and Tony Ruffing from the Ohio Chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. All right, we've got John Ingram and Tony Ruffing from the BHA, the Ohio Chapter of BHA. And first, I want to thank you guys for coming on the show, taking time this morning to chat with us. Appreciate you guys doing that.
You bet.
And
hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, sure. And so I think I want to start with, if you guys could just kind of tell us a little bit about yourselves. What, did you grow up in Ohio? How did you get into hunting? That sort of thing, and then we'll get into a little bit about BHA and some of the public land issues that we got going on in the state here recently.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah. So the board chair, born and raised Ohio. My wife and I live kind of the northwest, north central part of Ohio, along the Sandusky River. Like I say, born and bred Ohio my whole life. Just got hunting, kind of in the very traditional manner. My dad took me out rabbit hunting, coon hunting, squirrel hunting when I was a kid. Kind of progressed into there, and now I'm a turkey nut and deer nut, and I spent the morning looking at the spring hunting catalog, so I'm getting geared up for turkey. But got into BHA just about a year ago, and just not really too many conservation organizations in Ohio quite like JW, and really just try to be an inviting group to folks. But I'm rambling on here, so I'm just going to let John take over real quick.
Sure.
Well, thanks for having us, guys. I'm Jonathan Ingram. I'm the co-chair of the Ohio Chapter. I'm actually from Southern Illinois, so I grew up kind of right on the Mississippi River, as close to almost inside the river, frankly. Easy. Any flood pretty much approached our front door. So I kind of grew up there running the river bottoms and bluffs of the Mississippi River, and ended up meeting my wife in college in Chicago, and my wife's from Cincinnati. So once we kind of wrapped up school, I moved out of Cincinnati back in 2005. So where I still live today. Kind of grew up, a lot of catfishing, a lot of pan fishing. a lot of bird hunting before I sort of integrated myself into football season. And for those of you who have played football, it tends to happen in the sweetest hunting seasons. So I played football in high school, played football in college, and went on to graduate school and kind of end up get kind of going away from hunting a little bit. Still doing a lot of backpacking, that kind of thing. But once I moved back down to Cincinnati, started picking it back up again, and spend most of my time, deer hunting, turkey hunting, just like most Midwestern folks. A lot of small game hunting as well, but get out as often as I can, get out with my kids as often as I can. So, but yeah, I've been here since 2005, and love the state. It's been a great experience.
Awesome. Yeah. So we sort of similar stories. We're all, the three of us are sort of born and bred Ohio, grew up hunting with our dad, and I guess, just to give you guys a little background on us, we grew up hunting with our dad, mostly in southeastern Ohio, Wayne National Forest area down there. And so public land is sort of near and dear to our hearts. And when, we sort of learned about BHA, and I guess to back up, BHA, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, for listeners that aren't aware, we learned about that through some other podcasts, actually, like the Meat Eater podcast and the Randy Newberg's podcast. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Backcountry Hunters and Anglers started sort of out west, right? That because there's a lot more public land out there. There's a what do I want to say? A bigger public land sentiment out there because of the way public lands were formed out there.
Yeah. Yeah, just a much bigger chunk of public land. A larger section of sort of of Western lands is public. Sure. They have millions upon millions of acres in some of those states. And really, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, fundamentally, what our goal is to protect public land and public water rights and access for hunters and anglers, but really for all those who use them, right? So the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers really formed as a response to some sort of political efforts to appropriate those public lands for private use, right? So to make sure that those hunting and fishing traditions in those lands that we've utilized can sort of continue to be available for us and for our children and for our grandchildren. So, the Backcountry Hunters and Anglers has grown. It's the fastest growing conservation organization in the United States. They've essentially doubled membership every year since we were formed.
Wow.
So we're doing great work. Really advocating and had some really great successes lately. So the BHA has extended into states. So there's all sorts of state chapters. Our Ohio chapter, we really became a formal chapter, an interim chapter, I would say, in January of last year. And then we were formally adopted in April by the national board. We started with less than 100 members, and we are sort of keeping up on the same pace in terms of doubling our membership on a pretty consistent basis. And we're over 500 members in Ohio right now. So we're pretty proud of the work we're doing, and we have a great board, and we're out hustling on behalf of those public lands in Ohio. We have very compared to the West, we're less than what is it, Tony? We're less than 4% public land in Ohio. So we have a much smaller. 4%,
we're ranked like 47 out of 50.
So it's precious to us, right? We don't have millions upon millions of acres, so we are going to fight to maintain every acre we have. So.
We like to view it out east here that because we have so much less land, we have that much more to lose. So whereas like states like Idaho, 2/3 of it is publicly accessible. Ohio, it's 4%. So that big difference there.
Yeah, for somebody that's grown up, born and raised in Ohio, like 2/3 publicly accessible, that's even hard to fathom, that does not compute, it's like I can't even picture that, Yeah.
I have two sisters who live in Idaho, and if they didn't have that, I'd trade places with them if they didn't have such terrible jobs,
Yeah. All right, so that's a little bit about BHA. Like I said, that's how we sort of learned about BHA, and I've been a member for a couple of years now. I don't remember exactly how long, but when I hearing about the work you guys do and just making sure that the public lands stay publicly accessible, that, like I said, that's sort of near and dear to my heart. And so I joined up shortly after learning about BHA. Could you guys talk a little bit about, I guess, not only keeping public lands accessible, but I saw last year you guys did a cleanup event at, what was it, Killbuck Marsh, where you guys went out and cleaned up a bunch of trash and stuff that people were dumping out there. Could you talk a little bit about that kind of work that you guys do?
Sure. Tony, you kind of led the Killbuck initiative. Maybe you kind of give them an overview of that, and I'll touch base on some of the plans for the future.
Yes, because it was kind of an easy location, and I've got a little bit of history there. That's kind of where I got started into waterfowl hunting. I've got some buddies that live up there, and they took me up there. And I've been hunting waterfowl for about 5 years now, and from the first time I went up there to early season during goose season, come downhill there was just kind of catastrophic. And that's just one case is in Killbuck, right? I mean, there's wildlife areas all over the state that just from lack of funding and lack of manpower, they can't do it. So we try to partner with the Division of Wildlife and do what we can on a volunteer basis. And, sometimes that's just somebody showing up with a trash bag, and, sometimes it's showing up with a group of folks with chainsaws, weed whackers, and what other implements of destruction you. With Killbuck, we were able to partner with the district officer up around Worcester, and we had about 12 volunteers show up that day. All in all, we had like an 8-10 hour day, but the big trouble that they had was a few of the parking areas had just become overgrown. You can't see it from the road, so somebody's in there dumping trash, and officer drives by. Well, he can't see into that parking lot to know if anybody's back there or not. So we just basically did a big old brush cleanup, opened that up, and not only did we clean up an area that allowed for wildlife officers and sheriff's deputies to see if anybody's back here doing something or not, but we also increased the parking area there as well. So, on top of cleaning, we're using, access opportunities where, before maybe only 3 or 4 vehicles can get there, now 6 or 7 can park in there. That's that many more people able to get out and enjoy our public land system. So we were able to partner with that. I think we had about 4 dump trailers full, and then, like I said, we just cleared out a bunch of parking areas that they control better and keep folks from, because that's how you lose it, right? You get one bad apple ruins the egg.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, we that was a pretty positive initiative, and something we've heard from membership about really having an interest for more boots on the ground kind of opportunities to improve habitat and improve public land. We have, like I said, we're a relatively young board, but we've really been hard at work trying to be intentional about structuring the work that we do, and just as importantly, the work we decide not to do, right? Because if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. So sure. we have spent some time kind of going through a pretty extensive internal strategic planning process as a board, and we have had basically 3 sessions at this point and come up with basically 4 focus areas. One of them is habitat, is wildlife and habitat restoration. So we have a committee chair, a co-chair, whose primary function is to determine, whose primary mission is to determine, okay, how can we create boots on the ground improvement opportunities throughout Ohio that our membership can get out and get engaged in. Some of us have the ability to volunteer, 10 hours a month or 15 hours a month, and some of us just want to get out for a weekend and a day on a weekend and get our hands dirty a little bit. So we have some interest. We're kind of working some angles right now with the Wayne National Forest, with Zielinski State Forest, working with the state for Fallsville Recreation Area to potentially do some quail and pheasant habitat restoration work there. So we're really kind of being proactive about creating those opportunities in the future as well. So
okay.
We'll be communicating about that. So
we are interested in hearing from our membership. If you have a project that you would like us to consider, please let us know. It's kind of one of those deals that we don't know there's a problem, then we can't fix it.
That's a good point. That's good to know. So I actually spoke to somebody from the, I don't know if she works for the Division of Wildlife or somebody that works for the DNR or Division of Wildlife, somewhere in there. And they had talked about your guys' Killbuck Marsh cleanup last year, and just she couldn't say enough good things about you guys, and just really appreciated the work that went on out there, the volunteer work. And so, do people need to be members if they want to participate in some of these events, these cleanup or habitat things?
No way. Basically, you just have to have a strong, a willing heart and a strong back. That's about it. So kind of follow us on Facebook or Instagram, Ohio BHA. Pretty easy to find. We post those opportunities for cleanups. Sometimes they can be quick. Obviously, one of the things that we want to do is grow our membership, and from the perspective of having events and getting folks out to lend a hand. We certainly want to advocate for folks to get involved in our organization, because we believe in, we're passionate about the mission that our organization stands for, right? But we're not also coming into this with a hard sell kind of situation.
Sure.
People want to come out and help. All are welcome. All are welcome. So.
Awesome. And so you said the best way for people to sort of find out about these events would be your Facebook and Instagram accounts.
Yeah, we keep those pretty well updated, and anytime there's an event, we're usually posting that information ahead of time. We have sort of laid out an event schedule for the year. We're trying to have an event about every month to 2 months. We just wrapped up a pint night and also staffed the Deer and Turkey Expo up in Columbus just last weekend, and we're moving into here in the spring to have a couple of cleanup events. As well as here in May, Memorial Day weekend, we're planning to do a canoe trip as well as a wild game barbecue that families can come out to on the Little Miami River, which is one of our 2 national scenic rivers here in Ohio. This is kind of down around southwest Ohio. So
awesome.
My stomping ground. So we have some events coming up for the year, and we'll be announcing a few more coming up as well.
And just for people's reference, how do people find you on Instagram and Facebook? What are your handles, I guess, on there?
At OHBHA and Ohio Backcountry Hunters and Anglers on Facebook.
Okay, great.
Jason.
Yes.
I'm sure, I don't know if you planned, I just don't want to pass over it just in case. Let's definitely get into how people can join too.
Yeah, so that was one thing that I wanted to, because I've seen some questions, maybe it's been on your guys' social pages, but when people join, are they just joining the Ohio chapter? Are they joining everything? How do they make sure that they're like? When you join? I just threw a lot of questions at you there, but
no, I'm feeling it, man. I'm feeling it.
when people join, right? They pay their membership fee, and does that money go to you guys, or does it go to the national board, or how does that all work?
So we get this question a lot. Like this weekend at our last pint night, we had a fellow from Kentucky and we had another fellow from West Indian. They kind of asked us the same thing. What happens is you join the national, you join Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And then from there, they take your address and they take your information and anything pertaining to you in your area, your state, they'll send you information based on that. So you'll keep up to date on what's going on with the Ohio chapter.
Okay.
If you live in Ohio. Now, let's say you live in Ohio and sign up, well, then they keep you informed of what's going on in the Dakotas. But yeah, your membership goes to the BHA headquarters, and then we keep you informed based on your information from there.
Yeah, and we get so the short answer is go to www.backcountryhunters.org. Membership's $25. You become a member of the national organization, and you're pretty consistently informed about what's going on in Ohio. So you sort of default become part of the Ohio chapter, part of the Ohio membership group, and so you'll get customized emails and that kind of thing.
And you get the your membership includes the Backcountry magazine, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Backcountry Journal. It's really an incredible publication. It comes out quarterly, and the Backcountry Journal, great photography, great stories. Some of them written by members, just kind of updating folks on what's going on with public lands throughout the United States. There's also chapter sections, chapter policy update sections. So, for example, in the summer edition this year, we're going to have we'll have an article coming out about AEP lands, which is kind of a hot button, kind of a hot topic in Ohio these days. So, so you get access to that journal, which is a great resource to kind of stay informed of what's going on both within Ohio as well as around the country.
Yeah, I was just to add on that. I'm always, when that publication comes out and it shows up in the mail, I'm always impressed. Like you said, it's got really high quality photography, and it's just a nice magazine to look at,
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful one. We actually, we did a recruitment and retention effort last year. We auctioned off a turkey hunt, and we wrote an article about that. That'll be coming out in this coming spring edition as well. So part of our recruitment and retention efforts. So
cool.
So Ohio will be in there. So get your membership quick.
Yeah, there you go. So you mentioned, I think that was a good sort of segue. You mentioned Ohio's AEP land. So that was one of the things that we discussed about, wanting to talk about while we had you guys on the show. And if you could you give a little bit of history on Ohio's AEP land, sort of how they came to be, if whatever you can share there, and how it is that hunters are allowed to access that land, and sort of what some of the recent concerns are with the AEP lands.
Sure. So, Tony, feel free to jump in. The AEP recreation lands, they're really a pretty unique resource that is available to the state. So, essentially, Ohio Power identified essentially reclaimed coal mining country and turned it over in the 60s to become publicly accessible for hunting, fishing, backpacking, kind of whatever outdoor pursuit you like. So this AEP recreation land, though it has technically been owned by a private entity, has become really a cherished public resource in our state. Okay. And right now there are about 60,000 acres of AEP land available. But AEP lands are now up for sale. And like I said, these are technically privately owned. But publicly enjoyed resources. And these lands represent about 10% of the total public land access that we have in the state. One of the major initiatives that's come out of the governor's recently announced budget is called the Conservation Reinvestment Package. And the intent behind that package partly is to generate revenue to purchase those lands so that they remain accessible to the public. And, from our perspective, 10% of our publicly accessible land is a huge chunk. We're going to advocate pretty strongly that the governor and that our legislators sort of pony up and purchase those resources from AEP so that they remain accessible to the public.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks a year ago probably saw where the Kasich administration announced that they were buying for those acres. So with that, with that all in all, there's about 55,000 remaining, and so like John said, that was a big chunk in the conservation package in DeWine's budget, and if anybody, I think it's pretty exciting. I mean, there's quite a bit of energy. It seems like we have an administration here who's making it a priority to be focused on, our natural resources and our wildlife within our state. So that's why the budget that was proposed last Friday, that was a lot of talk, and it was the acquisition of the AEP. Some of the numbers around that part of Ohio, there's not really the jobs that be like District 15. A lot of the revenue generated right now is based on the outdoor economy. And that's a $24 billion a year industry. And if we lose 10% of our public ground, that'll allow a huge chunk of revenue for the state.
Yeah. So that's why I definitely wanted to talk about that today, because, like you said, 10%, that's a big deal, right? I mean, that goes back to what you were saying at the beginning, where we've got less public land, so every acre sort of matters, right?
Absolutely.
And
It's really high quality land. It's great hunting and fishing land. So, and it's just a great place to go. The number of lakes and ponds, 350 ponds and lakes. Part of the Buckeye Trail system. Tons of camping spots. There's row crop and agricultural leases. Those things that sort of are enticing to deer. Yeah, deer and turkeys, right? So
yeah.
It's just great. It's great land. It really is.
It's not even just hunting and fishing. There's all kinds of access, and there's horseback riding. There's hiking opportunities. There's backpacking opportunities. So, I mean, AEP really fits into a niche that BHA tries to fit into. So we're hook and bolt by name. We try to be inviting to anybody. Whatever reasons you have to get outdoors. Well, AEP encompasses all that too. It's like it's just an area in the state where, if you have the ability, if you want to go outside and just go do something, AEP has something to offer for you.
Is that AEP land, the 55 or 60,000 acres, is that included in our public land numbers since it's technically private? Like the 4%, is that included in that, or is that in addition to other public land?
It's included.
Okay.
So, we consider it as sort of publicly accessible land. So, it's a pretty big chunk of our resource. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you guys know, or maybe Jeff, maybe was the reason that it became publicly accessible, or that they've kind of converted it back to wildlife habitat, was that part of the agreement originally when they said, yep, you can strip mine this, but there needs to be some kind of a plan to put this back when you guys are done? Are you guys aware of the history on that at all?
I would think, sort of based on and this is utter speculation, and I hope someone emails and corrects me, but I would think in the 60s that sort of that sort of pre-environmental movement, that sort of progressive reclamation concept sort of wasn't on the forefront of people's minds. From my perspective, whoever at AEP, whoever at Ohio Power came up with the idea of turning over to recreation land was a business genius, because he created a demand to purchase that land when that land became less profitable. So, frankly, I think it's a good model, because I'm in favor of creating some public incentive to purchase new public lands. That's
Sure.
a good thing. So that's kind of. But again, total speculation. It's Saturday morning. I get to do that.
Yeah.
There's still some oil and gas revenue being generated off AEP. And to my knowledge, as part of the budget bill, there is some language in there that allows AEP to retain, some of those oil and gas rights. And I think that's part of the reason why AEP held on to it was speculation for kind of some further exploration and other resources.
Okay.
Yeah, what I know about the AEP property is this was part of the reclamation process. They needed to do some improvements to it, mandated, and I believe they needed to hold on to the property for a certain period of time to implement those reclamation processes. So that's why it kind of fell into the area it did, because they were trying to find a use for it while they still had it, even though it wasn't producing them a lot of revenue at the time. And it's kind of in a weird place because of the time that, the mining took place. The reclamation standards were a lot more lax.
Mm-hmm.
A lot different of things would happen now with a area that is mined like that.
Absolutely.
So that's what I know about it from my experience with it.
So we're talking about an area that was reclaimed back when Lake Erie caught on fire. So
right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So do you guys know, is the ODNR sort of getting first dibs on buying this, or is it if the DNR can come up with the money, then they can make an offer? Or do you know how that's sort of playing out at this point, or is it playing out at this point?
Right now, the Division of Wildlife and Division of Natural Resources are in trying to work out a deal with AEP as far as acquiring it. And all that kind of gets wrapped up into DeWine's proposed budget. One of the areas that Wildlife's budget is increasing, license and tag sales. And he's got those included in 854 license and tag sales. Now, I'm sure you've seen a lot of backlash on this. People in 10 years. There's not been an increase since 2004. Since then, inflation's increased 33%. The increase that they're talking about for license and tag sales is at 32%. So we're under that inflation rate. Plus, traditionally, hunters and anglers have ponied up when need be. Is another opportunity for increased funding. There's like I say, there's talk of acquiring AEP, and they're hopeful to 55,000 acres. But currently, what's going to happen next is the budget with Division of Natural Resources is going to give her testimony to the Subcommittee of Agriculture and Natural Resources. We don't know for sure when that's going to be. There's some speculation that first or second week of April, but we just don't know for sure. And we could have as little notice as 48 hours. Some membership to play a more active role when we have a little bit more information, but we don't know when that's going to be just yet. So that's something that we're going to kind of have to ask our membership to hang on with us for. But after that, like I say, it'll go to the Subcommittee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, and then debate will begin on it from the proponents and the opponents of kind of these increases and where some of this budget information is going to go to. Once that's done, it'll go to the House floor, and it'll begin debate on the House floor, and hopefully once that gets, then it'll go on to the Senate side of things. All going to the public lands package that we saw in the federal House and Senate. So it's all playing this kind of tennis court back and forth game. But so like you say, there is the Division of Natural Resources is trying to strike a deal with AEP as far as in public access.
Yeah, it's kind of inside baseball in terms of the state budget process. It's about as clear as mud, right? So there are all kinds of committees. There's all sorts of negotiation, horse trading that's going to happen, and decisions and sort of decision points will be sort of made in pretty quick fashion. Part of our task is to be in touch with that inside baseball and to let our membership know when and how they should act on a quick basis. So we'll kind of play interpreter for our membership and help define, when to engage in the process. So you're really kind of paying attention to Instagram and Facebook. That's where we'll get that message out. The short is, the governor has proposed about $45 million as essentially bond money that can be used toward matching resources to purchase AEP. They probably have the best, they're probably in the best position to purchase. There aren't many private buyers who are going to want to buy those huge chunks of land, especially with most of the mineral rights depleted. But there's still competition from the private sector. So it's really important to us to advocate for the purchase of that land. So a good chunk, there's bond money set aside. Whether or not it makes its way through the process will depend on that horse trading, and it will depend in large part on us as hunters and anglers jumping and getting engaged in the legislative process and advocating to our legislators when the time comes. But it's hard to say quite yet when the time, when that moment's going to happen. So just kind of pay attention, stay vigilant. We will keep you all engaged on a consistent basis and updated. And when it's time to go, let's go.
AEP doesn't want to sell off in 500 acre pieces. I mean, they want to sell off big chunks as big as they can. And as far as Ohio's the Division of Wildlife and Division of Natural Resources is in that A spot right now.
Okay. So it sounds like at this point, the listeners, the membership, is there anything for them to do at this point, or wait until we hear from you guys that you need to contact legislators, or where are we in that sort of process? Should we be doing something at this point?
Well, I would say it doesn't hurt to demonstrate your support for the conservation reinvestment package, but I think we want to see how the process unfolds before we start applying sort of aggressive pressure. So, at this point, I would understand the package. We've tried to summarize it, kind of hit the high points. Tony mentioned the fee increases and the AEP items that are included. Advocating to your legislator, if you know them, that you support that package is not a bad thing to do. But we're going to pay attention to see if it turns positive or turns negative. And if it turns positive, we want to get out there and and make sure that our legislators feel supported. And if it turns negative, we want to turn up some heat. So we will. So at this point, really just kind of pay attention. We'll try to decipher the inside baseball for folks, and keep you all educated and keep you in the loop. But it's kind of a hurry up and wait game at this point.
Sure. So when the time does come,
Sure.
What is the best way, or what do you guys recommend as far as how should people engage their legislators?
So, we're sort of in the process of deciding as a board exactly what that ought to look like. But, generally it's going to be just like with most grassroots efforts, it's going to be a phone call and email campaign to legislators. So,
Okay.
when we have a decision point and a message, we're going to want to get folks out talking to their state reps, talking to their state senators, and especially those who were involved in the committee process. So, that'll likely be kind of the best way to go about this. But there may be some other things and some other opportunities, legislative receptions, that kind of thing that could be helpful. So, but that's largely the best. That's largely the way that we, as the citizens, engage with our representative officials. So.
Okay.
There's a lot of legislators. So like Tuesday when I was down there in the legislative version, talking to a few of them, they had no idea. Like I live in West Ohio, AEP may as well be in a whole different country. So reach out. Don't be afraid to reach out to your legislators and let them know kind of what your thoughts are, because they don't know what they don't know. So make it a point to help them know what's going on and then support it. It can be as simple as a phone call, email, smoke signal, carrier pigeon. I don't care what it is. Don't be afraid to reach out to them.
That's a good message there. Just in general, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
You got to make your voice heard, right? People like to, at least we've seen, right? People, it feels like want to be a keyboard warrior, but when it comes time to actually do something, a lot of times they don't, right? And
Yeah.
just
Well,
make your voice heard.
Everyone's busy. Everyone's got jobs and families, and it's easy to become disengaged. But this is our public land birthright, right? You know what I mean? This is. There are very few places in a person's life where you can sort of forget about your past and forget about your future and be completely in the moment. And when you're in the wilderness, that's how I experience it. That's what feeds me.
Yep.
And I would rather that opportunity be available for my children. So
The AEP recreation ground, that's Ohio's Alamo as far as hunting and fishing and outdoor recreation opportunities are concerned. The state's seeing a sharp decrease in hunting license and fishing license and tag sales. So with that, the budget's kind of going down too. So a lot of the efforts are focused on R3 efforts and, just getting folks back outside and we're never going to see the sharp increase of license and tag sales like they did in the mid to late 90s, kind of that prime for that baby boom. But if we can see a stabilization instead of a sharp decrease in license and tag sales, then maybe we can kind of level this off a little bit. But if we don't, like say, AP's the Alamo, if we don't save it, then all we're doing is just, plugging holes in the sinking ship after that.
That's a good way to state it. I think that just to kind of state the importance of it, and we need to make sure we're conserving what we got, like we said. I got another question for you guys, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but one of the other things that we've seen sort of in our social media comments about some of this new budget proposals and things is, once the budget is approved, what sort of how should I ask it? What sort of guarantees do the people have that the money is going to get spent the way they say that it's going to get spent? We've sort of seen some, I don't know what the word is, some jaded opinions that, it's just going to end up lining people's pockets and it's not actually going to go to conservation. And is there any kind of guarantee that money is going to be spent the way they say it's going to be spent?
So I'm gonna sort of take my BHA hat off and put on my professional hat. Okay. I actually work with governments. I work with governments. As former budget director in the city of Cincinnati, I have some unfortunately detailed experience with the way local and state government works.
So it sounds like you're perfect to answer this question.
And the idea that this sort of conspiratorial idea that money is going into government coffers and it's sort of lining people's pockets. To be honest, it's largely nonsense. So most of that sort of comment strain doesn't make a lot of sense. And here's why. We've sort of gone through a process in this country where government budgeting, government accounting is hugely regulated. It's hugely restricted. Okay. In terms of the license fees and things like that, they're, essentially, without again getting too much into inside baseball, those fees are encumbered. They are dedicated towards specific purposes. There is an annual audit process that makes sure that those funds are spent for specific purposes. And if they are not, if there are negative audit findings on an annual basis, it impedes the state's ability to access federal grants. It impedes their ability to access bond revenue. So there are a number of sort of mechanisms in place to keep that kind of thing from happening. And on the rare occasions when it does happen, it is largely investigated and criminal proceedings are brought. So we have in this country a structure, and a really reliable structure, honestly, that makes sure that public monies are spent in a responsible way. And the money that we're identifying for through license fee increases and things like that, it's going to go toward conservation because that is how it's defined, and that's how it's audited, and that's how it's enforced. So I get I get the sort of perspective that there's a negative view of government, right? That's something
Sure.
that's sort of ingrained in who we are as Americans, and many of us take pride in it, right? But I don't see that as a real threat. Frankly, increasing these fees is long overdue. If you want to fund decent wildlife science, if you want to fund decent public lands, if you want to make sure that deer and turkeys are available, we have to pay for it. That's just the way it is. We cannot expect A-grade resources with a D-grade investment, right? So, I personally, support the license increases. I am confident that those increases will go toward the purpose intended.
Awesome. I'm glad I asked that question, because that's great information for people to be aware of and to know, I guess, right? Because that's, like I said, people have this sort of general overall distrust of government, and so it's good to know that information.
Yeah.
All right, so Jake, Jeff, any other questions you have for John and Tony before we sort of start wrapping up?
I guess the one question I have, and it's kind of just for personal information, I guess, like, it always seems like the topic is public land is disappearing, it's getting sold, it's getting traded, whatever. Is there a process to gain public land, and how does that work? Like, as a private entity, if I don't, but say I had 100 acres and I want to turn this over to be public land, instead of selling it, or whatever. My grandpa had 100 acres and it was in his will. Like what does that look like? Are we ever going to get more, or is it always a losing?
So the state actually increased some of its public land holdings here within the last what was last year. I can't remember the name of the wildlife area that they
Eagle Creek, yeah, Eagle Creek Wildlife Area.
Yeah, it was somewhere around. Yes, thank you. And so it's not always. I know a lot of times around these conversations it seems all doom and gloom. We're losing this and we're losing that, but there is a lot of areas that we are increasing access and increasing our public land holdings and the area. We don't always see that in Ohio so much, but out west, you can look at a lot of areas that, and like Wayne National Forest is a great example, right? Wayne National Forest is all this acreage. Everybody likes to talk about how big it is, but if you look at it on a plot map, it's checkerboard. So, there may be a couple hundred acres, a couple thousand acres here and there that are publicly accessible, but they're landlocked by private landowners. So, with programming like, federal bonds and grants and stateside as well, there's areas that, like LWCF funding is a prime example. The acquisition of maybe a half acre could be the difference of accessing a couple thousand acres, but they're victories nonetheless. Not with to answer, or there is programs where you can actually, in your will or you have you've got some acres, take out a row crop or pasture or whatever it may be, and turn it into a wildlife area, turn it into a park. I mean, there are programs out there that you can work with your land, to kind of increase that access.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and you actually touched on my question. Hunting in the Wayne National Forest, we've discovered that there is a not insignificant amount of public land that is landlocked by private land. It's inaccessible. So that is something that basically you guys are aware of and you guys are working to improve.
So I'm glad you brought that up because you mentioned you all kind of cut your teeth hunting down in Southeast Ohio, probably in the Wayne. I take my rut vacation in the Wayne. It's one of my favorite places in Ohio. We have 240,000 acres of timbered Appalachian foothills, rock houses, spring creeks, and just the occasional 1930s Oldsmobile. It really is an incredible place. 300, it's special. Okay. And now this is actually a really good opportunity to start to tackle some of those public access issues. Wayne National Forest Service is currently initiating, they're in the process of going through a forest management plan revision process, which they complete every 10 to 15 years. The last one was completed in 2006. In May, so coming up very soon, the Forest Service will be releasing their assessment report of the sort of environmental conditions within the forest and starting the planning process. There are a number of citizen working groups. There are a number of ways to sort of stay engaged about what's going on in the process. We on the BHA board, our policy and advocacy committee particularly, is actively engaged to make sure that sort of the interests of hunters and anglers are represented in that process. And, that access piece is obviously a really important component of that.
All right. So I guess a follow-up to that. So the access piece, would that look like basically easements across private property, or how would that sort of play out? Or what are the possibilities for that to play out to get access to some of that landlocked public land?
That's the major mechanism. That's the major sort of institutional mechanism is a conservation easement.
Okay.
So, they can be hard to come by, right? So you can really only enact them as part of the sale process. I would say there is a program in the state. There is effort within the Wayne, kind of based on my conversations with folks there to pursue as many of those as possible. So they're proactive about it. But ultimately, it's a private owner's decision as to whether or not they want to attach an easement to their when they sell their land, right? So every restriction you place on a land purchase diminishes the value of that that land.
Yeah.
That's one perspective, right? The other perspective is adding a conservation easement maintains the sort of the character of that land in perpetuity, right? So there's kind of two sides of the argument, and it really depends on the individual landowner. But there is an active effort to make sure that those things happen.
And how would people become aware of a conservation like say there's already a conservation easement in place? Does that show up like on Onyx, or how are people made aware that you can cross this private property to get to that public property?
It's not something that I have seen on Onyx, but I also don't really focus on areas that are landlocked based on that reason. So I don't know that I can intelligently answer that question.
Okay. Well, is there anything else?
My understanding Onyx is always kind of evolving and changing. So it's kind of as you come across some of this information. Let's say you're driving down the road, going to your hunt spot, and you see a sign that is marked a conservation easement, and you don't see it on Onyx. You see that. And sometimes these conservation easements may be, property owner passes away or sells off chunk. Sometimes it might be a 2-track, 100-yard 2-track from the road to the, whatever area it is on the edge of somebody's property. So, it's always kind of a two-party system there.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good information for people to sort of be aware of. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to cover? Any kind of closing thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, I think
BHA.
Yeah.
There you go.
Join the organization, man. That's about it. We're doing good work. We're doing work on behalf of public lands. We're doing work on behalf of your hunting and fishing rights, and we hope you'll get out and support us by joining. And if you don't, we hope you'll get out to some of our pint nights and events and just enjoy some good company. So
awesome.
Hope to the folks and membership will kind of bear with us through this process as far as DeWine's budget. Some of this information may come at you kind of fast, but don't be afraid to reach out to us if you have questions or concerns. And like I say, rest assured, right now we're watching this extremely close, and as soon as we get information that, we can release and give to the public, we're going to, because we want our membership and we want everybody to stay engaged and stay focused on it as well. So, but listen and stay informed and don't when it's time to act.
Awesome. Yeah, and we'll kind of be following your guys' social as well, and make sure we're sharing the information on our pages as well to get the information out, because like I said, it's important, and we need everybody's help. So, all right, guys, if there's nothing else, like I said, I want to thank you guys for coming on. I appreciate the conversation. I think we covered a lot of good topics in this one, and we'll have to have you guys back on sometime when the next issue arises, or after the AEP thing is sort of, the dust is settled, and we'll talk again.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, guys. Take care.
Thanks for having us.
And there you have it. I want to thank Tony and John for taking time to talk to us today. Hopefully you guys learned something from that. I know I did, and I really appreciate them coming on and talking with us. Hopefully you'll join Backcountry Hunters and Anglers and support the organization. There'll be links to all of their information in the show notes, as well as links to our social media pages. We're Ohio Huntsman on Facebook and Ohio Huntsman Podcast on Instagram. And with that, thanks for listening.